morning, everybody. What I'm going to speak to you about today is qualitative research in the social sciences broadly and specifically in your own area. I'll give you a little bit of background, a little bit of the context of where that I am speaking from. I come from Edinburgh Napier University, teach mainly on graduate programs, but in both undergraduate and postgraduate programs, people are required to complete a dissertation or a thesis. And what I will speak to you about is research methods, the delivered part of the program, the delivered part of a module which gives you a grounding in research, and then the outcome of that, which will be your research proposal, and how that research proposal translates and is able to move directly into your thesis itself. So all of this is talking about research and the research cycle. Research cycle doesn't change. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about a bachelor thesis, a graduate thesis, or moving on to doctoral study. What will change is the focus of your study, how you will move from a bachelor level. It can be really quite broad in comparison with what will happen as you move to your master thesis, and then the precision, the very refined topic that you will have for a doctoral thesis. And all of this, of course, that change in that funnel, if you like, which moves from the broad to the very narrow, that refinement is reflected in the research methods and the depth of your research. So, what is this research cycle? For qualitative research, it is talking about the fact that the first thing you will do is to determine what is known in your subject area. So what will you do? At Edinburgh Napier, what we spend a great deal of time trying to impress upon students is the requirement to go out and to determine the literature in your topic. What is known? To find a theory base. So, what we are doing here is going out and looking in books, and more particularly in articles. And when you're researching in the English language, we are very spoilt for choice. In the Russian language, you have articles which have been written in Russian, so the Russian-speaking world. We're very spoiled. We have everything that is written in the English-speaking world. It's available to us and our students. So if you are coming to us on a double degree, as can happen at undergraduate or postgraduate level, you would have complete access to the literature, the theory base in the English-speaking world. So, what do? You start looking at the literature. And the most important thing, the biggest common mistake that students make when starting this process is seeing a piece of work, an article, on a library list, like a Google list, and it has its keyword in it. Now, whether that keyword is for the broad social sciences, it may be in psychology, organizational psychology, work psychology, it might be in linguistics, it may be semiotics that it says, or in business, it might be something around strategic alliances. And they say, oh good, there's another one. Good, there's another one. And start building up this pile of literature, which eventually becomes overwhelming. And you start going, I can't do my literature review because I have too much to read. So the first thing you have to learn is selection. And in the research process, we have this first part, defining what is known in your area. The first part is to select what is known in your area and then to write about it. And in writing about it, what we ask is not that you write what is there, because that already exists. We ask you to be discursive. We ask you to discuss the literature. So perhaps the easiest way to do that, particularly at bachelor level and to a degree at master's level, is to do it chronologically. So this person said this in 2000, in 2005 this person added to it, and then there was another movement in 2010 when further information and further research became available, and in 2015 this is the state of current knowledge. So what we've done is we've tracked a development. Rather than just say, this was right, this is right, this is right, this is right. There are 4 different sources. We start to develop an argument. And what that does, it makes you very often an expert in your subject, particularly when you get to doctoral level. You are an expert in the subject, having read extensively around the area, which allows you to generate research questions or hypotheses. I'm a qualitative researcher. I generate research questions which translate into interview questions, and then I can go and ask people or interrogate my material about the topic and the nuanced area which I am exploring and taking knowledge into. The literature review allows you to generate a research gap and generate research questions. And then, of course, we have to have a way of determining answers, responses to this new question or these new questions which we're asking. And how do we do that? Well, we have to have a research philosophy, a research strategy, an approach. So this is all talking about the way that you approach your research, the way that you collect data, the way that you analyze it, and very importantly, the ethics of what you're doing, the limitations of what you're doing, and because no piece of research can ever be complete, where you're going to guide people towards future aspects of research in this topic. So, let's look at those. We have simple ologies. We have ontology and epistemology. The ontology is your way of looking at life. And that is something which I would not recommend that you bring in to this level of research at bachelor or master's level. I think it is important that what you know about is your epistemology. And your epistemology is, like all these things, it has a Greek base. It is about how is new knowledge generated. And as a qualitative researcher, I believe that new knowledge within the social sciences, particularly within linguistics, is not necessarily all found out through survey, through counting and through measurement. It is found out through interaction with people. So it is socially constructed. So, when we socially construct knowledge, or when I socially construct knowledge, and I have done research, for instance, recently, on strategic alliances within the European higher education area. What I have done is I have gone out and spoken to people, asked them questions, so it is not a survey. It is not a survey whereby I am measuring 1-0, yes, no, black, white responses. It is a case of asking a question and having a series of probes or supplementary questions which allow us to have what becomes not an interview, because you don't want that formal atmosphere. You want it to become a professional conversation. And this professional conversation allows two people with similar levels of knowledge to discuss their encounters and their experiences within the context that you are looking for. And that will allow us to build a lot of responses together, and these are themed together. If we are doing case study research, for instance, what we might be looking at is doing down in each individual case, and then across a series of cases, our analysis and the way we start looking for themes. And those themes, again, will have come from our literature. So this is showing, again, the importance of the literature, but we're starting to generate a research cycle now. So, I've gone out, I've found my literature, I've asked my questions, and I have gathered my responses. My epistemology, interpretivism, is built around this social construction of knowledge, asking people for their experiences on a certain subject, and then starting to analyse these things. So, we have new knowledge starting to be generated here. But all I've done so far is started putting the knowledge together. And that knowledge coming together is merely a presentation of what I am doing, and it cannot be anything further than presentation. It does not become analysis until I start comparing back to my literature once again. So, when we had somebody saying something in 2000 moving up to the state-of-the-art knowledge in 2015, previously as an example, now I have been to PFUR and I am asking about an extension beyond the European higher education area into Russia. And I've maybe asked the rector here, what are your experiences with strategic alliances in Europe and the Far East? So doing something comparative. And he starts telling me, and what I will then do is compare this back to the literature and determine if new literature, my research, is confirming or contradicting. It contrasts with what is already there, what is already known. And if it does not confirm, if it does contradict, if it contrasts, we have found something out. And I think the important thing here is that when, regardless of which level, when we go out to do a thesis or a new research project, we are generally not going out to find out a new planet or the Higgs boson or some great new scientific discovery. It's a small piece of knowledge. It's a small piece of knowledge, but it's new. And this is what we're proving, because we're saying it is not in the existing body of literature. So when I compare back, again we have this research cycle starting to become complete. And the research cycle, again, it's the same at bachelor level, it's the same at master's level, it's the same at doctoral level, and it's the same if you're discovering Higgs boson. It is the depth and the precision with which you are going into your subject which will change. It's very often the refinement and the tininess of the knowledge as well. So, what does all of this mean practically to a student? It means that at the start of any new research project, you've got to be thinking about what I'm going to do. What am I going to do for my bachelor topic, my master's topic? What am I going to investigate? And that first aspect of investigation, when you start to write a research proposal, I always ask you to have, well, I suppose 3 things. In a proposal is about 4,000 words long. About 10% of that, so only 400 words, should be about the context. So this is the area. Maybe these are the trends in the area, particularly for somebody who's doing something like advertising as cultural discourse, where we're looking at the changing face of advertising and the changing messages of advertising, and very particularly the changing language as we have moved from very old technology of television or posters into the new technology of social media. Then the language has changed as well. So have the messages, so have the signs, so the semiotics have changed. So in our introduction to our research proposal and our introduction to research, what will we be expecting? Something around the context. Maybe something around the trend has shifted. And then, very importantly, 2 key aspects. Why am I doing this research? Because I think there's a gap in knowledge in this area. Because these trends show that the speed of change is so fast that knowledge has not kept up. That's very often one of the answers. And then who will benefit from this research? There's got to be a beneficiary. It's very, very rare that new knowledge is being generated, particularly in the 21st century, with no beneficiary. It's just done because it's there. That's not the case. It's being done to advance something. So tell us what that is. And then you will go on. And so vitally important, again, whichever stage of the research hierarchy you're at, whichever stage you're looking at, you need to carefully define your aim and your objectives. Your aim has got to be what I'm going to do here, what I'm going to find out. So, is it exploratory? Are you going out to explore a topic? Are you going out to analyse it? So it could be, again, if we look in the area of linguistics, and if we look in language and mission statements, it may well be that you want to do some sort of content analysis, so a measurement of something like the use of the words competitive advantage in mission statements. And you may well be going out to measure something as opposed to explore something. This is something that needs to be very transparent, very explicit at the start and in your aim. And if your aim is your outcome, your final target, we need a series of steps which will show how you are going to achieve that. And that comes through writing good, clear, coherent objectives. And those objectives are going to be probably no more than 5, possibly as few as 3, but one will be around theory, one will be around data collection, possibly and analysis, or one will be specifically about analysis. One will be about your findings and the conclusions you draw, and one may be about the recommendations. So these objectives start to show the reader, any reader, whether it's you, whether it's me as the marker of your thesis, or you as the audience for a new publication, a new scientific publication. It shows the steps that you are going to lead us through. And that's what your objectives are about. The objectives have another key function. And that key function is for you as you're writing. Because if you have very good objectives, what you will not do is start drifting off. Because the objectives will bring you back. Because you will know whether you are achieving your objectives and therefore staying on the path towards achieving your aim. So you write aims and objectives, and then you move on to starting your literature review. And the literature review is something which is very specifically done in this proposal to show how you have generated the research gap and your research questions. And that literature review is the piece that you will keep coming back to. A point about writing any research, particularly in qualitative research, the starting point for you has got to be your literature review. Because if you don't start with what is known, you can't know if you've got a gap. And the other important part when you are doing primary research and it's qualitative, and I was talking about, for instance, I could be speaking to the rector here. I'm not going to get many chances to speak to the rector. For one thing, I've flown from Edinburgh, and I've had to coincide that with time to see him and to come here. And if I go home and I start reading another paper and think, oh, I didn't ask him about that, I'm not going to get that second opportunity. So your literature review's got to be complete. It's got to be wrapped up, and it's all got to be done before you go out starting to collect your data and to try to determine what has been done. So, from your literature review, we have research questions, and now we have our research design, and that design element is going to have your ology. Now, it may be positivism if you are going to do scientific research in measurement, or it may be interpretivism in qualitative. And we're starting to write all this down. This is an important part, and it's part that actually generates you into the research. And this is a very important aspect of your thesis, not just your proposal. What you have to write about within the methodology or the research methods part of it is not another literature review. The most common mistake at bachelor and master's level is to write another literature review that Bryman and Bell say this, Saunders says this, Easterby Smith says this, and start telling us all about the way research can be conducted. One of the most fundamental aspects of your research is that it might be done in 2017, for 2017 submission. But in 2019 or 2020, somebody might think, that was a really good piece of research. I want to know if the world has changed in that time. Therefore, your research design has got to say what I did. So you've got to be clear about, I started with an interpretivist epistemology. I went on to do qualitative research because I needed rich data, lots of data, not just ones, zeros, yes, no, from a small group of very highly qualified professional people, the rector. And I analysed this through the themes that I had generated from my literature review, and these were the themes. And from that, I came up with this finding. Now, if you are laying that out with that level of precision, what I did, rather than what can be done in scientific research, what you're allowing somebody to do in 2019 or 2020 is to replicate that research and determine, with a comparison, a compare and contrast, has anything changed? Has it changed faster than was expected in 2017? Has it stayed the same? Has there been some contextual, some macro-environmental driver that has changed it entirely? So these are important aspects. And then, when you're doing any sort of scientific research, after your methodology, you will always be asked for a plan. And that plan is generally utter lies. People write, and they come up with a lovely Gantt chart, and it says, I'm going to do my literature review from the 1st of January to the 30th of April, and then I'm going to do this and this and this and this. And it's nonsense, because you go on holiday, you get sick, you get bored. You don't bother doing it. For the first month you think, oh, the hand-in's not until April, so woohoo! I'll go and work in Burger King for 40 hours a week. And this happens. And what we are not doing, we're not asking you for a contract. It isn't a contract. What it is you have thought about the research process and you realise how much time you're going to be devoting to it. And that's what a research proposal is. And that research proposal, if written well, translates directly into a thesis. But the thesis, whether at bachelor, master's, doctoral level, you've got to remember that research cycle. It doesn't change. What are you going to do? You're going to get your literature and be very aware. Be aware now. There is nothing more boring. There is one thing more boring. There is nothing more boring than conducting your literature review. And this is why you get distracted and you start building and building and building piles of paper. This can all go into my literature review. So this is where selection is so important. Remember that. The one thing that's more boring than writing your literature review is for us, and that's reading another one. But that's another story. And that's why the more discursive, the more discussion that you put into it, the more interesting you make it, the easier it is for us. So, first part of the research cycle, this body of knowledge, the literature. Finish it before you move on to generating your research questions or your hypotheses. So, there's the first arrow. Generation of research question, generation, I suppose there's a split there, generation of interview questions for qualitative research, hypotheses for quantitative research. These, next arrow, generate responses. And those responses, next arrow, takes us back to a compare and contrast with your literature. And that's analysis. And that, regardless of whether we're writing a proposal or a full thesis, is the part that's most ignored. People are very, very happy to write about data collection, because data collection's a lot more fun. It's about, I'm going to do my survey. My survey's going out on Facebook, my survey's going out on SurveyMonkey, whatever it might be. This is all activity and it's good. I'm going to go and do my interviews. But when you get the responses, this is when the work begins. And this is why people write 3 pages on data collection and a paragraph, 3 sentences on data analysis. The analysis is so important because that's what you're finding out. So please ensure that that balance is right. But that's your research cycle. Research methods, research, all of the ologies that go with it. It really breaks down to the simplicity of that circle. The depth of it changes hugely. And as you move through this hierarchy of bachelor, master and doctoral level, so the better you get at it as well. And the first step, the first dip into the water, is often quite difficult. And the second can be, again, difficult because what are you doing? You're changing the lens with which you're looking at a topic. But don't lose track of that cycle, because if you don't lose sight of that and you break it into individual parts, as we've done with the research proposal, and you work by chapter, it becomes a manageable piece of work, and a thesis or a paper, again, becomes very, very manageable. So, thank you very much for listening to me. That's my half hour up, but I think we've got about 10 minutes if anybody would like to ask any questions.
Thank you.